Let's talk some chess. So obviously the World Chess Championship is happening right now with Jan Nepomniachtchi versus Ding Liren. I thought the game today was not super exciting, so instead we're going to talk about one of Ding's amazing games from the past. This was in Moscow in 2011 in the Aeroflot Open. Ding's playing with the black pieces, and someone named Gata Kamsky is playing with the white pieces, and white opens up with e4. We have Ding playing e6, d4, d5, and the knight comes here to c3. Ding responds symmetrically with knight to f6. White here pushes e5, so this obviously comes with an attack on the knight, and Ding moves it away to d7, and white responds with f4, now has this nice sort of structure in the center. Ding wants to break open that structure and plays c5, and instead of trading, white decides to defend that pawn with knight to f3. Ding decides to attack the pawn with knight to c6, and white adds another defender to the pawn with knight to e2. So now the pawn is defended by the two knights and the queen. Ding develops his bishop to e7, and white says that's not enough defense. I'm going to play c3, and now the pawn is defended by another pawn. We have Ding castling kingside, and white, still not done defending, plays bishop to e3, and now you have 5 different pieces: the two knights, the dark square bishop, the queen, and a pawn defending this d4 square. Probably would have made sense for white to get some pieces out and castle, but it is an important square, so maybe that's the correct strategy in this case. Ding plays f6. We have g3, and now the queen comes out to b6, and now already you have to be a little bit careful for white. You have this really beautiful pawn structure that looks sort of like a rooftop, and that's all good and everything, but your king is not very safe on e1, and it's not clear which side you should castle on. The pawn structures on both the queen side and the king side are pretty disrupted, and the king is not going to be safe in either of those. And already your b2 pawn is being threatened, so the base of this nice pawn chain is being threatened. So sort of tricky to figure out what to do here. And here white defends the pawn with queen to d2, and Ding starts to break down the pawn chain with e5. We have d takes on d5, on e5, and then Ding brings his rook to d8, which is going to be an important move. If this file ever opens up, the rook will be on the same file as the queen, and also if this ever becomes a passed pawn, the rook will be behind it. So a nice handy move there. White develops the bishop to h3. This comes with an attack on the undefended e6 or e pawn, but instead Ding just pushes d2. And the reason that Ding doesn't care about this is because, let's say white takes on e6 with check, Ding retreats the king, white retreats his bishop. Then you have this knight takes on e5 move, and if you take back with a pawn, you've opened up a discovered attack. Ding has opened up a discovered attack of bishop on bishop, and now this is just a better position for black. So because you have the two bishops, the center is about to open up, and white's king is not very safe. So white decided to not go for this route. Instead of taking the unfettered pawn, white just retreated the bishop to f2. White also could have taken the pawn, but again, this gets closer to opening up the center, which white does not want to do with the king just sitting pretty on e1. So retreats the bishop, and here Ding pushes on with the knight on d3. And here white played knight to c1. It looks like you can take with the queen on d3. I haven't analyzed this, but you are going to run into some discovered attacks with the rook, so maybe that white wasn't interested in that, and instead just adds another attacker to this pawn and threatening to take it on the next move. So Ding obviously wants to preserve this pawn. He plays knight to f8, and now the rook is protecting it, so if the knight takes, it'll be pinned. And here, kind of a weird move, white plays b3, and this allows Ding to shift his queen over to a6, adding now 2 protectors to this dangerous passed pawn. We have a4 by white, b5 by Ding shuts it down, and then white finally castles kingside, but the issue now is you just have these not very protective, beautiful string of pawns, but not going to protect the king that well. This diagonal is going to become very important, and it's completely open. There's no pawns blocking it, so just keep an eye on that. And speaking of the devil, Ding fianchettos his bishop on f7, and now this bishop is going to become just totally dominant on that crucial diagonal. We have rook to a2, a nice little rook lift. We saw actually Ding play this in the World Championship in, I think, Game 6. It's played here. And now white pushes b3, opens up a defense of the queen on the pawn, and Ding pushed d3, and now white desperately tries to close the position. Ding says, no, 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 I'm playing knight to a5, and white, kind of just maneuvering the pieces around, plays e3. And now it's a very closed position. You know, this is closed. You know, there's not a lot. There's a lot of potential for black here, but it's tough to figure out how to break open positions. So take a second and see if you can find the move that Ding played to really get the attack going. Okay, so if you found the proper sacrifice, it is knight takes on c4. So knight takes pawn. You can't take this pawn on b3 because then, you know, the knight would take back, but instead knight takes pawn takes knight, and queen takes pawn. So you've just sacrificed the knight for 2 pawns, but you've created 2 passed pawns of your own, which are about to link up with your other passed pawn, and so, you know, a very worthy sacrifice for Ding to make. He now has a ton of pressure coming in on the queen side and has now opened things up, opened attacking lines a bit. You know, just a move ago, you know, this was super closed, but now obviously there are avenues to attack. So white here plays f5, trying to get some counterplay of his own. We have e takes on f5, bishop takes on f5, and now queen to d5. And this continues to support the passed pawn on d3, but it also establishes a battery of the bishop and the queen. And now if white makes some silly move like knight to g5, we have queen to h1, check. Well, not quite checkmate because the king could escape, but this would obviously be a very, very dangerous check indeed. So this knight is now essentially pinned to f3 because you don't want the queen to sort of break down black's defenses like that, and this battery is going to become a real problem. White now takes on d3 finally, so finally gets that nasty passed pawn out of the way, but Ding has 2 more, and Ding immediately plays c4, challenging the bishop. The bishop retreats to b1, probably wants to stay in the vicinity of these passed pawns, and that happened to open up a discovered attack of the white queen on the black queen on d5. White, of course, is under attack, wants to trade queens and just like cool the temperature, but Ding says, no, 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 I'm putting my queen on c6. I'm opening up a discovered attack of the rook on the queen on d2. So the queen has to move. It moves to e1, and now you can sort of see white's pieces starting to get really cramped. We're going to see more of that soon. And now Ding brings his knight to g6 to get ready to join in on the fun. And this was the position where white could have sort of gotten back in the game, or at least had a relatively robust defense. I think we'd all want to play black here, but the computer says it's okay to play white here if you make the move bishop takes on g6, and then presumably Ding takes back and sort of messes up the pawn structure here. The idea is that you cannot let this knight get into the game because it's just going to break open white's position, but unfortunately for white, that's exactly what happens. White plays rook to f2. And this is a fine move, but you need to play it after you remove the knight from the scene. And Ding immediately makes white pay. He plays knight takes on e5, so just took a pawn and now is threatening to take, or I guess attacking at least, maybe not threatening to take, but threatening this knight. And remember, this knight is really essentially pinned. You can't move because then the queen will move to h1. In this case, you know, if the knight does move, this is checkmate because the rook is taking away the f2 square. So instead, Ding brings his white brings his other knight to e2, and now you can see just all these pieces crammed in near the king, and it seems like that should be safe, but it's really not. This bishop is undefended. These knights are kind of awkward. The rooks are just untapped potential because they're blocked by a knight which is pinned. So just a really awkward, you know, Ding is just forcing white's pieces into this like meat grinder, and they're not able to move or do it. It's like that room in Star Wars where the room like gets smaller and pieces are just not effective. So now we have this beautiful rook lift, rook to d3, and you know, I won't talk about this bishop takes because we'll see that in 1 second. First, white plays knight to d4 with an attack on the queen. It also adds another defender to this knight on f3, so a nice little move. But Ding just plays queen to d5, and now white takes the bishop on d3. The problem with this is it allows a knight taking back on d3, so a nice exchange sacrifice for Ding. And boy, I bet you know, white wished he took the knight when it was still harmless on g6, because now it's in a threatening position. It's forking the queen and the rook. It's threatening to exchange sacrifice back, and white is forced to move the queen to d2, and Ding takes the rook on f2. We have rook takes, and now, you know, again, still white's pieces are Ding's pieces are very nicely spaced and ready to attack, and white's pieces are just really crunched in, and this knight is pinned, and it's just a tough position. So Ding makes the first really powerful rook slide. He slides his rook all the way over to f8, and he basically is thinking, okay, this knight is pinned, I want to attack it more. So the rook adds an attacker to the knight, and here white doesn't really have a good move, so just plays a4, maybe, sorry, h4, maybe hoping to get the king another way to escape. But that allows Ding to continue to push his pawns, and I bet you forgot about those passed pawns. These are two very nice passed pawns on the king side, and we have c3, which obviously attacks the queen. The queen moves to d3, and now we have bishop to c5. So this bishop wasn't doing too much on e7, but now it's very much involved in the attack. And now it's not really pinning this knight because the bishop is defended, but you have these two bishops just eyeing this amazing diagonal. You know, this bishop is teaming up with the queen and potentially delivering checkmate on h1, and this bishop is lined up with a knight, a bishop, a rook, and the king. And so that's a great bishop, and generally when that happens, you know, things are going to go well for black. So just a really nice bishop pair here. White breaks the pin, moves his bishop to f4, where it's protected by the pawn. But now Ding says, okay, you know, this piece is pinned. Now so he didn't really, I misspoke. I guess he broke the pin of the bishop, but you also created a pin now because now the knight is pinned to the rook. So you sort of created a pin for the knight. If the knight moves, then the bishop will take the rook. And now Ding says, okay, that knight is, you know, I'm just going to slide my rook over and attack the other knight. And now you have the queen, the rook, and the bishop attacking this knight, and that's, you know, very dangerous for white. So white adds another defender to the knight with bishop to e5. Bishop's protected by the knight, and now the knight is sufficiently protected by the other knight, the bishop, and the queen. But now Ding says, okay, now I'll attack the bishop. So this rook has just slid back and forth and just, you know, rained fire from above on these white pieces that are desperately trying to defend. So the bishop retreats, and now this allows the kind of the finishing touch, which is rook to e1 check. And this is just a really tough check to deal with. The rook spent so much time sliding around, and now, you know, here it comes straight to the point. And you obviously cannot take with the knight here because then you get the move we've been talking about, which is queen to h1 checkmate. So instead, white blocks with the rook, thus creating another pin. And now see if you can find the finishing move for Ding. Well, I just give you a second or two. Not a very hard move to find. Okay, the correct move is queen takes on f3. And this takes advantage of two separate pins, both absolute pins. The knight cannot take back because the bishop is pinning it to the king. The rook cannot take back because the other rook is pinning it to the king. So the only piece that can take back is the queen on f3. And now the game is over because now you have bishop takes knight on d4. This comes with a check. The king is forced to move, and now you get this bishop takes queen on f3. And this is totally game over. I think white played one more move. White took the rook on e1, and then white resigned. Because even though you have a rook versus a bishop, you have these two extra pawns, and they are awesome, awesome pawns. They are connected passed pawns. It's going to be basically impossible to stop them, especially with these two bishops really active. So white just resigned. And again, you know, just kind of funny to go back to this little situation that white had with all of his pieces stuck and not doing much, and Ding's pieces really spread out and joining in the attack. And I especially love this rook just sliding around and adding attack where it's needed. So really fun attacking game. Hope you enjoyed it, and keep watching the World Championship. Hopefully we see some more fireworks even similar to this. But thanks for watching. Drop a like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.